Hello, my name is Paul, and welcome to the Stormkeep. I'm joined today by my co-storm hosts.
Hey, podcast store. Is that what we're calling ourselves again?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
AJ here.
Night Podcaster MJ here.
Right on. So this is Lords of the Storm. This is a new series, kind of a new series. It's just furthering one of the videos we made before, which was our list building video. We decided to turn that into a full series. We decided to name it after the Lords of the Storm, which are the high command of every storm host. Well, in particular, every strike chamber. So this is our first recurring series. We're hoping to have, we have got some other ideas in the works. And moving forward, all the list building videos that we do are going to be under this banner, Lords of the Storm, so it'll be easier for people to find. In the future, we're hoping to bring in some special guests to talk about their lists. In this list in particular, we asked our community to submit, and we got some pretty crazy stuff. We had over 30 lists submitted, and 3 were chosen by our viewers to be featured in this video. We're hoping that the next time we do one of these, it'll be a little bit spicier. This is kind of still a little simplistic in terms of list building. This is, make whatever you want. There's no restrictions whatsoever. Some people made really crazy stuff. Some people made really powerful stuff. Some people made something in the middle. We're hoping next time we add some more restrictions, like maybe you're not allowed to use Thunderstrike models, or maybe you have to include at least one dragon, something like that. So we're gonna spice it up in the future. So let's jump into it. JJ, this first list is yours. You called it the Missile Shield.
We're starting out with me, eh? Okay. This is a lot of fun. I had discussing with Paul. I don't know. It was a fun idea that I discussed with Paul one day after making it. But we're doing a Knights Excelsior build, and it doesn't look too appealing, but it's all around the formation here. In terms of battle line, you got your 15 Protectors, 15 Judicators, and just a squad of Liberators to run things out. You got 3 squads of Liberators, I should say. Just as screens. Your hero, or heroes, really whatever you want, but for this iteration, I just picked Lord Relictor and Knight Incantor. ×2. But yeah, Paul, do you want to switch the slide to the next one?
Yeah, we have visual aids for this list.
So, this is why it's called the Missile Shield. The idea is that, now in this picture, just proxy Vindicators for Protectors here, but you just kind of want to move your Protectors up with crossbows surrounding them. The idea is, if you take the 15 Judicators, they're still going to be in cohesion in that ring. Or if you squad them in 3 separate squads, I mean, you can't really break cohesion at that point. You just have to keep within 1 inch of each model, right?
Yeah. As soon as with 15, as soon as you lose 1, you start losing models to cohesion. But if you lose 1, you're probably going to lose all of them. You're going to get hit by something that's going to probably take them all out.
Which is fine, because that's why you have your Protectors there.
Yes. So let's run through your enhancements here and the stats. So you've gone with more drops on this. This is not a 1-drop list, and I'm assuming that's because you've got enough shooting here that you feel like you can handle going second or being forced to go first. And You've got a ton of wounds. 121 is really high for a Stormcast list. Most of our lists these days are sitting around 80 to 90 wounds. This is definitely on the higher end. And model count too, 48. This is just all infantry. Look at this.
Yeah. And like I said, this is one that you can sort of flex around a little bit. The core is the 15 Judicators, 15 Protectors. I was actually thinking earlier today, maybe just take some stuff out and run a Toralon up with them, so to speak, like after a deep strike or something. I'm not sure there.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make that. Yeah, just make Unleash Hell a little bit more potent if somebody tries to charge at that ball,
Yeah, Crossbow Unleash is really good. That's pretty good. So you've got Blessed Weapons here with High Priest, so you're going to be re-rolling that. I'm assuming you want that to go on the Protectors. And then you've got Celestial Blades on 2 different heroes, so I'm assuming you really want to Celestial Blades with one of them and then Mystic Shield with the other.
Yep.
So yeah, it looks like this is a list built all around those Protectors, and you value those Protectors so much that you've put ranged units in front of them.
Yep.
Which is a very
ranged units
strategy.
As a screen.
Yeah.
And you've heard of Pike and Shot. Never shot in Pike. I don't think a shot is ever at the front.
Yeah, we're starting things off a little crazy. Now, of course, cons here is that we're really limited on mobility, and mobility in this sucks. If you brought this out to a tournament, people would actually hate you if you tried to move everything like one piece at a
Yeah,
time.
there's very little that can penetrate that
Yeah.
castle. Yeah, they would most likely just try to play around it because they know that it's like a slow block.
Yeah.
Um,
And of course, this kind of formation would only be viable in a open table, so to speak. If you're playing like a bit of a city court type thing, then you're not doing much.
Yeah, if you're really restricted by, I could see terrain really messing up your formation. You'd have to go more narrow, and you might not be able to do that because of deployment limitations.
Yeah.
so hear me out, right? If you're running this shot and pike formation, is there like a Stormkeep version of this where instead of Judicators, you run something cheaper, like handgunners, and just surround your protectors with like this cheap unit that you don't even give a shit if it dies? It's fine. It's just a good shooting unit. It'll unleash hell for free if something charges it.
Yeah. I mean, again, just it's whatever you want it to be. The key thing here is that weird death ball.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
This is good. I like that. I like the 15 protectors. I've also submitted a list with 15 protectors that we can talk about later. I definitely did not put ranged units in front of them.
Yeah. We lost our translocate. We got to be creative with our protectors now, guys.
Yeah,
definitely.
All right, so run us through how you would deploy this and how you would play this. Let's say like rounds 1 and 2. What would you generally be doing with this?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm still trying to figure out, like, concretely. Like, if you want to play a bit more of it, you could do it two ways. If you played it on the table and just, like, sort of slowly move up, you could go about that way. You could try to use, like, Steadfast March to help out with movement.
Okay. Maybe in that case, instead of the second Incanter, you run a Wild Form Battle Mage. That way you get the bonus to run and charge.
Yeah, that's an option too. But I mean, even deep striking, you could potentially do that too. Now, obviously, 9-inch charge isn't going to be reliable, and you have to open up that ring to get the protectors in. Or sorry, it'd be a 10-inch charge at that point.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't be able to charge through your own Judicators, so you'd have a completely different formation if you use Scions to deploy them.
Yeah, no, that I understood. You kind of have to like open up the ring a bit, but what I'm getting at is like, actually, no, you could just deploy the 9 inches away, but no. Yeah. Again, this is why I'm talking about this list is a bit of a pain in the ass to actually like figure out how to deploy / move.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, it looks pretty ready for playtesting. So let's get some games in with it and see where we can take this concept.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, what other possible changes? It looks like you're considering going Gardas for a 5-up board. If you did that, you'd have to drop from 15 protectors down to 10.
Yeah, and I mean that gives you more flexibility in what you could bring in at in the list if you wanted to go with Hallowed Knights, for example. We mentioned it, or I mentioned it earlier, but if you wanted to reduce the risk of losing all those Judicators in one combat due to like a cohesion loss, you can just swap them out for the 3x5 there. You could drop and like I said, a lot of it's just the infantry. I just plopped in Liberators to spend points, really, but if you wanted to, you could probably drop in like a Lord Imperator with some extra hammers or anvils, like Annihilators or something along those lines.
Yeah, with the Knights Excelsior, that would also fill a battle line slot, so you could swap out Liberators for that.
Yeah.
Cool, man. This is a good concept. I'm looking forward to playtesting it.
Yeah,
we'll see how interesting this gets. Okay. Mergank, you want to take this one away?
Sure. So I've been trying to build a list around Stormkeeps because I feel like that's a rarity. And even though I know for those of you who saw us on Warhammer Weekly and heard some of our earlier discussion around Stormkeeps, in general, I don't find them that worth it because trying to steal objectives with really slow-moving units, not having tactical flexibility with Signs of the Storm generally isn't worth it. But, I wanted to see what I could get up to. And ultimately, like, this sort of also came about with a discussion online with a few people regarding who think Stormkeeps is utterly busted. And the idea here for this list is basically to buy time for the Vindictors. Or the Redeemers to get to turn 3 and turn on their OPSEC, where they count as 15 models each. Initially, my plan was to stay with something like a block of 10 or 15 Vindictors, get the most out of that defensive buff. But I figured that's not the way to do it, because putting too many points in eggs in one basket means you have one very slow, high point investment unit that can't move around the battlefield that efficiently. Whereas having these like 15 model groups spread out and be able to go independently where they want is pretty useful. Everything else in the list is either made to support them or buy time for them. So in this case, I have 10 Judicators, the 2 groups of Fulminators, and a Stormstrike Chariot to essentially be better threats to the opponent, so the opponent doesn't necessarily focus down my Vindictors and not let them get to turn 3. The main hero components of this list in the Warlord Battalion are obviously Gardus, because he just makes the Vindictor so tanky with his 12-inch 5-up Ward Save Aura. And then Lord Relictor and Knight Incanter. Translocation, because once it's turn 3, you want to start plopping those Vindictors as close to objectives as possible. And then Knight Incanter, because it's, once again, I chose him for a defensive ability. You can go for Mystic Shield on him or Thundershock for an 18-inch or a 3-up -1 to win. And the Stormstrike Chariot, initially I wasn't going to put that in. I was just going to go for like another Vindictor, but I feel like it's like, I don't want my Vindictors to necessarily be the anvil in this list, whereas in most other lists it would be. I sort of want something else to take the brunt, and I feel like the Stormstrike Chariot with its big enough base is something you can just put out front on a 3-up save, and it can absorb a few things for a while. I went for Hold the Line because practically everything in this list is Battle Line except for the Fulminators and Chariot. And I went for the Holy Command enhancement. Firstly, Call for Aid because I want to be able to quickly replace a Vindictor in case I lose one, because that's what this list is built around. And then Thunderbolt Volley for the Judicators. So yeah, what do you guys think?
Well, let's break down the stats first. You went for really high drops, 11 drops, with a Knight Incantor, which means you're okay with getting, letting an opponent go first because you can dispel their big scary spell. You can get rid of that guaranteed, unless it's Seraphon, of course. Make it just cast out of your range.
Yeah, sure.
You've got a really high model count and a really high wound count, just like our previous list. This is very infantry focused, very efficient points per wound, and So let me ask some questions here. I guess we can talk about it with the next slide, but I just wanted to ask about your unit composition here. So you've got these Fulminators and Chariot, which seem like they're going to be moving forward and buying time for the Vindictors to come in to activate the bonus model count on objectives in round 3.
Mm-hmm.
And have you considered running it as 4 Fulminators instead, and then running Celestial Blades on them so they can pack more punch on that first turn?
Oh, definitely. No, I absolutely have. The reason is I wanted to be able to spread out threats so my opponent can't just like focus one unit down with something. The idea is this is still a castle, right? I'm still going to have my Vindictors up front. And if you go to the next slide, I'll explain a bit more about how I intend to play this. So Guard is in the center, Vindictors and Judicators forming a castle, Fulminators on the flanks, and Chariot possibly they're up front or on the flanks. And the idea is I can move the Chariot up, move everything up, and then try to make sure that my opponent is always wary of my Fulminators and doesn't try to like focus my Vindictors down. So this list is sort of trying to play the castle game, but in a sort of gotcha way where you really just want them to be like, okay, I have these multiple threats that'll kill you. Please focus on them until turn 3, and then I can just start taking over objectives. And these Vindictors were not extremely tanky because they're on a 3-up save, 5-up Gardus, plus I have a Call for Aid bank somewhere that they'll be able to take objectives from you.
Okay. Let me ask you about the Vindictor choice, because you're focusing on Redeemer, so this could technically be done with Liberators and Sequitors as well. We're not going to bother talking about Vanquishers. Why Vindictors over those 2 units? Because you said you don't want them necessarily to be an anvil, and you do have the points here to upgrade a couple of these units to Sequitors, which would do more damage.
For a couple of reasons. One, I think if I could take Sequitors, but I think I want that 5-up against shooting as well, and Sequitors don't do that. Moreover, if I take Gardus, the Sequitur 5-up ward save in combat is sort of wasted. The damage is not why I'm taking the Vindictors. Like I said, this list is trying to win the attrition game and take over objectives and still use the typical damaging pieces that Stormcast tend to use. Fulminators, shooters, what have you. The reason I didn't pick Liberators is because of 2 things. I want maximum value out of my Vindictors, and they have 2 things. A, they have more wounds, which Liberators don't. I mean, Liberators technically kind of do, but on a 4-up, I think when they're near objectives at the end of the combat is not something that I would build around, whereas Vindictors just have an attack. And that's especially true when you combo that with only the Faithful, which is on a 4-up, Vindictors get to fight. and then when they die, they have one more dice that they explode with. So that's really what I'm trying to maximize. That if my Vindictors are going to die, like what's the max value I can get? I understand I could probably get more with Sequitors, but I couldn't fit, some hammer units and Sequitors in. I think Sequitors are just, I think, a bit too expensive. Maybe one of those Vindictors could be a Sequitor unit, because it's something I could reliably take out of the Gardas Castle and sort of have it be sort of independently have a 5-up ward save on its own. So I could totally see that. And if you go back, I think I have 1975 points.
Yeah, you've
so
got
I definitely
25
have
extra.
the points. Yep, I have the points to upgrade one of those to Vindictors. So you know what? Yeah, you're right. You could definitely go for that.
Yeah, because the Sequitors would also get Gardas' 5-up ward. If they're fighting in Gardas' aura, they could activate a free +1 hit, because you're not going to all-out attack on Sequitors, right? Generally, you're going to use that on something else. But there could be situations where you want to all-out attack on something else, and then, hey, they get a free +1 hit. So because you have the points left over, it might be worth considering. You could also do something like, bring 1 Liberator, 2 Sequitors, and a Vindictor. Just based on the points here. Just thinking about things you could do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, I totally get the logic behind that too. Something like a backfield holder, a midfield mover upper, and a Sequitor unit that can potentially break away from Gardas and still retain about half its defense.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea.
I'm also thinking here, just looking at how the points shake out, hypothetically speaking, if you were to drop all of these Vindictors down to Liberators and drop the Chariot, you could fit in, let's say, something very similar to a Chariot, something like Tempestors, that would add a bit more shooting power, still fast, not as fast as the Chariot, but still reasonably fast. Because this list, I think, what it's lacking in the castle concept is it's lacking shooting power. Only 10 Judicators with bows, I don't think is going to necessarily force a list that wants to sit back and be passive. I don't think it's going to force it to come to you.
Would you say, wouldn't it? Because ideally, they would want to lock down your Vindictors before the turn 3 obsec. Like, they don't want, like, the allure here is not that the shooters are necessarily going to kill you. It's that I'm going to keep shooting you. I will eventually get to you. And if you don't deal with my 4 Redeemer units, and you don't deal with my Fulminators and my Stormstrike Chariot, we will eventually kill you, and we will count as 15 models while doing it.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is if you want that, I think try to find 80 points somewhere and get 6 Raptors instead of 10 Judicators. I think that would fit this concept better.
I would never, I don't know. I think 6 Raptors in Stormkeep is like a big risk for me, because it's just like Scions. I view Scions as a really useful way to keep them protected sometimes. And like in this list, like I don't really care about an opponent's like shooting capability, because I'm like, everything I have, nothing is like that high value with, like I don't have 12 wounds for 480 points.
I see what you're going for. Okay, so you're going for something that has a high redundancy, let's say. Nothing is crucial. Yes. Everything is kind of disposable.
Yes.
Okay, that's an interesting
And
concept.
then Gardas to just make everything slightly bit more tanky, Because no, I totally get what you're saying. Like I would typically run Raptors with, not typical Hallowed Strike list, but this list is like, I don't want them to focus down one thing. And that's why the Vindictors aren't in like a group of 10. They're on 4 groups of 5, so they don't feel like a threat until they are a threat, and they're a threat mainly by their capability to take objectives. So
okay, yeah, I think it looks pretty refined. I'm not sure there's huge targets in here for Celestial Blades, but I think it might still be worth running over Thundershock on a Knight, just because the Knight has such poor range on the ability and they're so slow. I'm not sold on Thundershock in this list. Master Magic makes it more reliable, but the shorter range on the Knight Incantor makes it less appealing, let's say.
Oh, true. Yeah, it's not 18, is it?
It's only 12 with the Knight. Another thing here that I could see being an issue is you're very command point inefficient. You have so many different units that all want to be doing different things, right? You want to all-out attack in the shooting phase. You want to unleash. You want to redeploy to get extra movement. You want to do all kinds of things with this list. And you don't have any way to generate additional commands. Like you don't have an Allied Starseer or a Lord Imperator who's going to do it for free. And then you're also, I feel like you're going to be starved for command points. That's my impression for this. And you're going to have so many situations where your Vindictors die and you don't have a command point to use Call for Aid immediately. And that's gonna really sting.
I understand what you're saying. But yeah, like you said, I'm mainly thinking of using command points for the Judicator attack and a possible Unleash Hell. Like I don't plan on investing any into my Vindictors, because if my opponent's charging something that's bound to kill them, I'm not going to waste a command point on that. when I'd just rather bank it for a Holy Command later. I feel like Vindictors on a 3-up 5++ are tanky enough as it is to where I don't have to like sink command points into further defense into them. And if anything else, I can just Mystic Shield instead of Celestial Blades, because I think, yeah, you're right. I think I would take Celestial Blades now that I consider the shorter range.
Yeah, or Lightning Blast even, right? Something that can deal additional chip damage and force them to come through.
And then clear Vindictor for movement. Yeah, no, totally.
Okay.
All good points.
Yeah, I think this is I think you're taking.
I think it's worth a shot. I think it might need some work.
You've
it might
taken
need some play testing.
You've taken this concept of Hallowed Knight, Stormkeep Redeemers, right? Like that's the concept: is maximize only the faithful, maximize Shield of Civilization while using Gardas. That's what the concept of this list is, and I think you're taking it about as far as you can go.
About it. That's what's really cute about it, because it's like if I put two Vindictors right next to each other and my opponent finishes a charge in a way that engages them both, that's 2 Shield of Civilization triggers. Which, you know, which it's not bad. It's not, I mean, it's not something you should totally build around, but it's something you should consider.
It can sometimes just do 4 to 6 mortal wounds unexpectedly as you charge them.
Yep, exactly.
So by that, wouldn't it make more sense to swap out the Chariot for more of this?
No, yeah, that's what I had. The idea was the Chariot with its big base essentially is like an anvil where I don't want, like I said, I want to buy as much time as possible for my Vindictors. And I don't necessarily want them to start taking damage like turn 1 from an Alpha Strike. The Chariot helps in that sense. I could totally see you just replacing it with and getting more Vindictors, or even Seculars, because then that leaves me with about like 190 points, I think. So I can take more Vindictors and start upgrading them to Seculars, which, sure, fine. That works.
Okay. I think any other refinements would have to come as a result of playtesting. You know, you'd have to see, do you have enough bodies? Yeah. Do you have enough shooting? Do you have enough speed? Do you have the right support pieces here and there? Does it make sense to bring a 15 block of Vindictors and a Castellan instead? Right? These are all things you'd have to test out. So it's an interesting starting point for a list, for sure. Not as wacky as 15 crossbows in front of protectors, but
you mean the shot and pipe formation? I am never gonna live that down. Jesus, that's funny.
That looks awesome though. Those are great looking models, JJ.
Yeah. I want to see it in action. I really do.
Those are great looking what? Sorry?
The models.
Your models, your little shot and pike formation. That look pretty good.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to painting the rest of my protectors.
Mergank, out of 10, right? Whatever the most competitive list you think would be a 10, and a 1 would be like open play, doesn't matter, no restrictions. How would you rate this as in terms of like competitive viability? How would you rate this list?
So at an RTT, this has potential like 3-0 value, easy. Like you could I think you could go 3-0 with this if you play it right. At something like a GT, I think it could go 3-2 easily. 3-2 easily, 4-1 with a little bit of tight play, and if you're really, really lucky, I think 5-0. I think so. There are a few proponents of like how Gardas and Redeemers and Stormkeeps with the Shield of Civilization and the 4-up fight thing, fight again on death and call for aid and the 15 models, they seem to think that it's busted. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of things in the game that are just so uninteractive and so utterly damaging that I think they'll be able to deal with this list, because this list so much relies around Gardas. If you go to the possible changes that I have on the next slide, one of the changes that I'm recommending is removing the Stormstrike Chariot for Praetors, because once they take Gardas out, it's like it's free reign on your Liberator. So if they have like 30 Sentinels or 60 Sentinels, all they have to do is shoot Gardas, and you don't have Scions to protect them, and then you just whittle them down, but over the course of 2 turns, and you start taking objectives away from them.
So you're relying on that durability to push through, to get you onto the round 3 where you can start stealing objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this is solid, like 4-1 potential, possibly 5-1.
Okay, cool. JJ, you have anything to say about this one?
It's not something I would know how to play, frankly, at this time anyway.
Yeah, I think it does require like some tight piloting, and sometimes it'll be really, really good. Sometimes it'll be like Anvil Strike, where your opponent will be like, oh well, I can't do anything. Other times it won't be that good, and I think that's fine. I think strong lists are a good thing in the game. I think especially if they require like tight piloting, like there's a lot of lists like that. I don't necessarily think it's busted good, but I just think it's strong. So
Yeah, no, I could see this list feeling good to play at the very least. But again, like I wouldn't know how to necessarily play it myself right now.
Nothing in here feels oppressively strong. It feels pretty fair on all spots. Like you've got strong things going for you, but none of it is uninteractive for your opponent. They have chances to respond for it. So it's definitely would be a lot more fun to play against than some of the lists that we've made.
yeah, it's more of a question to see how all those mechanics that I mentioned in conjunction, like is the sum great? Like it's like is it better than the sum of its parts sort of thing?
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, we'll see in playtesting. We'll take a look
Yep.
at it.
Yep.
Okay. The next list here is one that I've submitted. It is called the Dracoth Blizzard. It's also a Stormkeep.
Hold on, Paul.
Okay.
Don't you mean MJ's list?
No. This
that's
is
his list.
this is my.
I made a toned down version of that for the thing.
Yeah. He took a version of it and like made it weaker on purpose so that we would have a mid shelf list that we could talk about on Warhammer Weekly. But this is the original version of that list. It is. I wouldn't call it like super refined or anything, but it's very straightforward to play. There's no fancy screening and reposting going on here. There's Dracoths, there's long strikes, and there's heroes, and that's it. That's all you get. This is a very straightforward list to play, but it has tremendous power. It has a Anointed on Frost Phoenix to do that typical combo that we talk about with Flaming Weapon casting on a 4, giving himself +1 save and +1 damage, and also everything within 9 inches has -1 to wound. This just deploys as like as a ball and then moves forward and just kind of runs through everything between casting Mystic Shield on the Fulminators along with or potentially Celestial Blades, all out defense, and the Phoenix Aura. You've got a very, very durable hammer that can trade efficiently. It can just murder things on the charge, but then when it takes damage, it is quite reduced. And you've got your standard Tempesters and Vanguard Raptors with long strikes for shooting support. So this is a very straightforward list to play, but it's also very powerful at the same time. So if you want to go to a tournament and do well and not think too much, this is a good choice here. So in terms of models and wounds, you're at 83 wounds, which is on the lower end. I'd say about 85 to 90 is typical for Stormcast lists. So you're very elite. You're only at 17 models, and I went with higher drops on this so I could get increased value because the Arcane Tome is certainly necessary, I think, to make the Frost Phoenix a threat. You can play without it, and you don't need to play Stormkeep in that respect, but I think having the Arcane Tome on the Phoenix makes it something that your opponent can't ignore anymore. Going from 16 potential damage in combat with the Talons to 24 is a huge bump.
So I'm looking at this list, and it's really like the core of this list is really the same thing as the list that I have later in the video here. But just curious here, from my perspective, how does this list go up against an Alpha Strike list?
Well, one of the things you could do, just based on the unit composition, is you could go one drop with this and try to compete with other Alpha Strikes. I went with the higher drop so that I could take Warlord and Hunters because I feel like Hunters of the Heartland is really, really strong. Fulminators definitely don't want to get roared. They don't want to get stomped. You really can't afford to take any losses from that stuff. But you could go one drop with this because you've got your commander, 2 sub-commanders, and less than 5 units. So you could put this all in a battle regiment and try to go first as well. How you would play against an enemy Alpha Strike, I think you'd have to put the Frost Phoenix up first and probably have to put the Tempesters beside it on both flanks. So in that case, you would have to probably sacrifice your Tempesters. That's one of the downsides of playing a very elite list, is that you don't have those cheap Liberators and Aether Wings that can just die and be very point efficient while they do it.
Yeah, that's a brutal exchange.
But, if you're worried about that, you can try deploying further back. This list does, I believe, include a Knight and Cantor, so you can dispel teleports and things like that. You do have your long strikes who can put in an Unleash to help assist, weaken things as they charge in. You've got your Anointed on Frostheart Phoenix who can weaken things. There's things you can do to mitigate it. So I felt like you could go for more value. You don't necessarily want to go first with this list because Fulminators and Tempesters aren't fast enough to get in the enemy face round 1 usually. You can if they deploy really far up and if you get the really close deployment scenarios, but not reliably. So I felt like more value was better in this case.
I have a question. So because it's a Stormkeep and you can never really protect anything with Scions, do you think in Stormkeep lists in general, is it a bad idea to go for Vanguard Raptors and maybe go for something with more wound count? Because I feel like this list is elite enough already with 17 models. I feel like any long range like one wound projection can like take those out, and you got very few models as it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure how well this would do. Really, the main threats would be, I'd say, Seraphon, Caradron, a lot of Ons, and Lumineth, right? Their shooting is really what threatens you in this case. If they're deploying so far forwards that they can get to your long strikes, I think you can get to them with your Tempesters and Fulminators. I think that is probably the case. Maybe Lumineth might be an exception to that. I haven't play tested this one yet. This is all just based on my experience putting all the pieces together here. Those would maybe give you a bit more trouble. Yeah.
Okay.
Stormkeep in this case is just so that you can give an Arcane Tome to the Phoenix. That's the only reason I went Stormkeep on here. It could be the case that trade-off is not worth losing Scions to protect your Raptors and drop in units.
Yeah. I just feel like every time I build Stormkeep list, I just keep thinking more about.
You want more.
I mean, even if you're not, making full use of the Shield of Civilization and the Vindictor ability stuff, like just having more wounds and more models because of the fact that I can't really protect any of them with Scions.
Yeah. If you're very concerned, I think with playtesting you could find that maybe dropping one of the Tempesters and bringing 2 squads of Liberators, because there are 35 points banked, so you could bring 2 squads of Liberators in here if you need more screening. But yeah, let's work through how this plays. So, like I said, the Frostheart Phoenix is really, really tough. It is incredibly durable, has a 4-up save, it almost always has a +1 save, and it has a 4-up ward on 12 wounds, and it's a hero monster, very durable. In Stormkeeps, unfortunately you have to be within range of Redeemer to get the bonus to Bravery, so this will be Bravery 9, still very reliably using Heroic Recovery. Your Dracoths are fighting around the Phoenix, that makes them really hard to kill, which is something, Dracoths are 3-up save and 6 wounds apiece, but I still feel like they die pretty quickly, right? People put a lot of damage into them, and they're not as tanky as a 3-up save monster would be. So any extra... Sorry?
I was going to say one bad charge into Stonehorn with Metal Cruncher, and there goes one Fulminator.
Yeah, they're tough as far as other units in the game are concerned, but they're expensive, so you don't get a lot of them, and they're not that tough, so you do have to protect them. So some good things this list has going for it. It does have the Long Strike double tap, because you can be very efficient with how you... I think there's certain units that work really well together. Dracoths and Long Strike seem to have really good synergy. One can be more forward and defensive, and the other can sit back and support. And they work well together because there's no real opportunity cost in terms of holy commands, because you can just take Thunderbolt Volley, and unlike taking, like if you're taking Paladins as your hammer, you have to consider Unleash Thy Hatred as a boost. But if you take Dracoths, you don't have to care about that, so you can just take double tap. Fulminators do disgusting damage. I did not take Translocation in this list. I actually took Blessed Weapons with Celestial Blades because I want those 4 Fulminators to kill a Gargant every time they charge. No questions asked, they will kill it. And Tempesters come in as excellent supporting units. They've got good shooting, they've got good melee, they can charge on flanks and control things on their own. They don't necessarily need to be fighting with the Fulminators, but they can add that extra little bit of damage on a very mobile body to assist with getting kills. And another thing that boosts the durability of Dracoths, because it's Hammers of Sigmar, everything has a 6-up ward. So in addition to having -1 to be wounded in melee, you will also have a 6-up ward on the Dracoths. And these little bits here and there add up to make them a lot more durable.
Yep.
So downsides, very low unit count on this list, and you want to play it together. Not necessarily as a castle, but like as a Death Star formation moving forwards. You want to keep your units together, so you don't have a lot of stuff that can break off and do its own thing. That's kind of where the Tempesters are coming in. And there's no Redeemer units, so you get no value from Shield of Civilization. You have nothing that can, nothing's disposable here. Every loss really hurts. So that's a downside. You can't really do anything to protect the Long Strikes. After they use their volley, they're left completely exposed because everything else is moving forward faster than they can keep up. And like you mentioned, Morgank, there's no Sounds of the Storm, so they are left vulnerable to other shooting. So I think... Like I said, I haven't playtested this one. I would have to see how it does in those particular matchups. I feel like the other matchups are very, very good, though. I think you can roll into a lot of armies with this and do exceptionally well.
Yeah, this is solid 3-2. Yeah, it's just like some of those range projection armies scare me because they'll just take because you're not going for a drop priority. You have at least I think 7 or 8 drops, so it is likely that you might get out dropped and sniped have your Vanguard Raptor sniped by something.
It could, yeah. That's certainly a concern. The mirror matchup is a lot harder. The Stormcast mirror matchup is just really awkward. In general, it's really awkward, and not having Scions makes it really, really difficult to play.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be the case that you end up going Scions with this, you drop the Arcane Tome, and you go for a Battle Regiment instead. I want to keep this concept as long as I can, because I am trying to make Stormkeep work, and I do like the Arcane Tome on the Phoenix.
Sounds good.
All right, Mergang, take us away on this one.
So this is a list that was already kind of featured on Warhammer Weekly, but I think this is the version that we've arrived at, and there's very little change. It's basically the same list. It's the Imperatant with 3 groups of Annihilators. The idea is to drop 1 each turn. Liberators for your basic screen. Aether Wings to give you +1 to hit during your Thunderbolt volley phase. 3 Prosecutors to either absorb Unleash Hell, or if you don't need to do that in any particular list, against any particular opponent, then they just act as another screen with their wider dispersed formation coherency rule. Vanguard Raptors to basically shoot anything that threatens you and keep shooting, hopefully every turn. And the Translocation Relictor and Incanter with Lightning Blast and Master of Magic. In this case, I've gone for the Arcane Tome Thundershock. So this is pretty straightforward. And the other thing we've gone for is the Prismatic Palisade, and this is basically a spicy bit of tech against Luminate Foxes to deny them line of sight even with their extensive movement towards their Raptors. So we can Thunderbolt volley something, then put a Palisade in front of them. Or it can even deny Alpha Strikes. Because models cannot end on top of it. They can only move within an inch of it or move through it, but they can't end on top of it. So the execution of this list is fairly simple. My only concern is it's pretty much on a low wound and low model count. There's a lot of failure points in this list, mainly that you could fail a 7-inch rollable charge with Annihilators. This is high drop, so you will be giving up priority, so there is a chance that you'll have to juggle what to put, because 3 Annihilators have to go in the sky, which means you need to have 3 on the ground, and there's other things that might need to go in reserves, and juggling what to put, what not to put will sometimes be an issue, especially if you're facing a shooting Alpha Strike list like Luminate. They tend to go 1 or 2 drop. So the possible change that I would recommend for this is to go hyper aggressive and take a Battle Regiment, forgo the Arcane Tome on the Lord Relictor. And then 2 Hunters of the Heartlands with 2 Annihilator Grand Hammers, because my idea is you don't really need to put all 3. I feel like you could shoot most things that have any monstrous rampages and then combo them with like 1 or 2 Annihilator groups. You don't need all 3, so have like a 3-drop list. The other thing I was thinking about was, because I already fulfilled battle line conditions with 3 Annihilators, switching out the Liberators for more Prosecutors. Essentially just having 2 points of Unleash All Absorbers or like a dispersed formation widescreen. Think of them as like slightly mobile Liberators. So yeah, thoughts?
One thing I've been thinking about, 'cause like you said, we showed this off on Warhammer Weekly last week, and one thing I've been thinking since then, the 7-inch rerollable charge with the Grand Hammers is not reliable enough for GTs for my flavor. I prefer more consistency than that. So I've been thinking, how do you make that more consistent? And one thing we could do is bring the Chronomantic Cogs, and we could cast those forward after translocating a Knight Incantor with Master of Magic forward. So I'm not sure where we could squeeze. Not sure where we could squeeze the points. Maybe we can find a little bit of wiggle room. Maybe I like having both, because sometimes you need to be very defensive and sometimes you need to be very offensive. And I think having the options is you can't actually have both because you only have 1 wizard in this list. No, you have 2. The Relictor is the tome.
Yeah, so, that's what I mean.
So maybe what we do is we drop the Aether Wings, sacrifice a little bit of hit bonus and on Thunderbolt Volley in particular, in exchange for having Chronomantic Cogs. Maybe that is a potential route.
Yeah, is that a +1 to charge if it's wholly within 18 or something?
Yeah, if you're near the Cogs, you get +1 to charge. So that would make it a 6-inch rerollable charge instead of a 7, which is far more reliable.
Definitely. Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but yeah, I think I like that idea. I think I would want to play test. But that's something I could definitely see myself adding. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing we could do here, if we find that the Grand Hammers just aren't doing enough damage to turn they land, because let's say we go 1-drop and they're getting stomped, right, or roared, and then they lose that. Mm-hmm. What you could do is you could run 1 squad of 3 and 1 squad of 6 instead of running 3x3. I like the 3x3 for a lot of matchups, but I think against, let's say, Archaon, Gargants, things that really need to die in 1 turn before they hit you back, I think a squad of 6 might be very useful for that.
Yeah, I think definitely one of the weak points of this list is the fact that you're always on a clock. You need to start dropping these things because you only have till turn 3 to do it. Or like you have 3 turns to do it. Having two, a block of 6 and a block of 3, gives you that tactical flexibility to where if you don't want to drop anything turn 1, you don't have to. You can just leave it. You don't have to drop everything 7 inches away. Sorry, you can drop a unit of 6 and a unit of 3 for turns 2 and 3 7 inches away. You don't have to like wait and then drop one Annihilator 9 inches away just because you didn't want to do one turn 1, something like that. So
yeah, I like the idea of also swapping out the Liberators for more Prosecutors, because they're basically the same in terms of screening. They just die all the same, but they give you that added utility. We'd have to make sure we keep enough units on the table, because you might have a situation where you want too many units in Scions. So
yes,
that
and I think that's
what
I mentioned, that you're always like juggling what to put and what not to put in Scions is pretty difficult, and I think like that's why like I kind of don't like that, or not. I don't like it. I mean, I sort of am skeptical about that. Removing Aether Wings for cogs, because that's one less unit you can put on the ground, so opening up a Scion slot for you.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be worthwhile to swap out Grand Hammers for Shield Annihilators. That kind of violates the whole purpose of this list.
Mm-hmm. But like you said, if you combine the Grand Hammers into a 6 and 3, then that reduces a slot for Scions. Yeah. So hey, maybe there's a bit of play there.
Yeah, because you would have with the cogs, let's say one of them would do a 6-inch charge, and then one of them would do an 8-inch charge. So you could drop, technically you could drop all 3 if you have cogs. 8-inch rerollable charge isn't the hardest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, so we definitely need to playtest this one a lot. I don't think this is ready for GTs yet. I think it's a great concept though. I love this idea. Like it feels like you're in a little sniper tower, right, with these long strikes and your screens in front of them. And as they're running towards you, you're just dropping these nukes on them constantly, like air support coming in, smashing things.
Yeah, it's like ODST. It's like it's such a sniper, then you have Halo ODST drop.
Yeah, it's very cinematic. Like this feels like the most Stormcast list we've ever made. This feels like, damn, this is going to tell a good story, win or lose.
Yep. Yeah, I like this list. I kind of want to try the new units too. So moving on, Saint Karazai.
Yeah, this is
Ultron, baby.
This is another one that was featured on Warhammer Weekly. There's not that many more. We only featured 4 on that out of our 9 here. This is a Karazai list. If you want to play Karazai, I think this is going to be the most fun way to do it. The core of the army is Karazai the Scarred. He hits really hard, but he has he's very fast too, but he has problems with survival because he's only 18 wounds for 600 points. He does have a 3-up save, so he save stacks really well, but he doesn't have a ward, and Praetors are really slow. They usually can't keep up with him. So how do you come? Yes, exactly. You just give him a pet Gardas instead of giving him pet Praetors. Gardas doesn't have to be deployed on the table with him. He can come in Scions. What else do we give him here? We got a Lord Castellan, so he's going to give him Mystic Shield and +1 to save with his Lantern. We've got a Battle Mage here to give him -1 to be hit. We've got a Lord Relictor here to give him Blessed Weapons so that he has exploding 6s. And we've got a Knight Incantor here to protect him from spells and give him +1 to wound. And alongside that, because Karazai is the general, in which case he doesn't get a command trait because he's unique, but I don't really care about that because all of our command traits are just terrible. So I would rather take Karazai as a general, and that way I get Stormdrake Guard as my battle line. So they can fly up and support him, and they do a fair amount of damage as well, while being also very tanky and protecting him from getting fully surrounded in melee.
I love that idea. Giving up the command trait, it may seem like a big deal, but honestly, like, given how garbage our command traits are, yeah. You're not overly relying on translocation or any like key spell or anything like that. I think everything in here is fairly reliable. Celestial Blades goes off on a 5, Relictor's Blessed Weapons goes off on a 2. I'm fine with taking some chances to really get Stormdrake Guard on the field supporting my Karazai, yeah.
Yep, and it even squeezed in a unit of Liberators here that you can use Call for Aid on. There's nothing really you want to be spending command points with this list. There's no all-out attack shooting, because nothing in this list has hit rolls of shooting. Like, you have breath attacks, but they don't roll to hit, so you don't all-out attack them. And in command, in the combat phase, you can all-out attack 1 unit and all-out defense 1 unit. And that's it. So you will have command points left over, so whenever those Liberators die, you can just bring them back and do Call for Aid with them. So you can deep strike them in with Gardas. That way he keeps lookout, sir, because your opponent will try to kill Gardas as soon as you drop him into play. But that's the list, yeah. You deploy Karazai with the Drakes, support heroes behind them, put Gardas and Liberators in reserve, drop them in wherever you're fighting, and you just win because of Karazai's stats. Hopefully that's enough to win. But let's break it down. He's going to have +2 to save, +1 from Mystic Shield, +1 from Lantern. He's going to have a 5-up ward because he's Hallowed Knights with Gardas, and he's going to be -1 to be hit. And then on top of that, he can use their Finest Hour and All Out Defense, so he could potentially be +4 to save on a 3-up. That just negates all rend in the game. That's amazing. Enemies just all the time, no rolling or anything. Enemies in melee have -1 attack on their profile. So if they have 3 different attacks, all of them are -1, which is great. Really huge force reducer. Karazai in melee is tremendous too, especially if you ever fight anything that's not Gargants and there's a unit of 5 or 10 or, oh God loves you, 30 models. That tail is insane because the tail specifically says you get a number of attacks with the tail equal to the number of enemy models in range. It doesn't specify that it has to be attacking that unit. So if you fight a big hero next to 30 models, you're going to take all 30 of those attacks from the skeletons or whatever and put it into that big model. And it's just the funniest thing in the world to picture. So pros, Karazai is really the pros. He's fast, he's flying, he does a lot of damage. If you can force your enemy to attack him, he's incredibly durable. He heals himself as he kills screens, which is normally a big problem for these kinds of lists, is you get screened out and nothing happens. But that actually helps, right? If you get screened and you pile your way in and you can kill a hero, you get bonus attacks for the rest of the game. It's great. He's a very strong model, but he's 600 points, so the rest of your list is pretty trim. You have a very low body count. You don't really have the capacity to play objectives with this list because you only have a bunch of heroes and Karazai and his bodyguards. There's no shooting, so you're going to have to kill the screens through melee probably, and you will never kill Lumineth Foxes with this list. So this is not a GT winning list. It cannot handle everything in the meta. And has a lot of drops and low body count, so enemy alpha strikes are going to do quite a number on you. If you get hit before you can put all of your buffs up, you're going to struggle.
Definitely, I think that's mainly the thing. You don't have any screens or anything. This is mainly like Voltron is. It's in a sort of way an alpha strike list in that sense, where it wants to be in their face and just tying them up and not letting Karazai die.
Yeah. One of the things I struggle with is figuring out what other enhancement to bring with this list, because I have enough heroes to bring multiple bonus enhancements just because I have that many heroes, I might as well. And I don't know what else to take. Because if you take a look, I've got an Arcane Tome and a Castellan, and that's the extent of what I care about. I guess I could take a Mirror Shield somewhere, but nothing really needs it. It's all just various support buffs.
Agree, yeah.
So it's not the most competitive list, but
it's definitely really fun. It's very high on the fun scale. It's like, I would say like a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 fun scale.
Yeah, I want to play a big dragon who hits like he has 2 Galmaraz equipped and then some, and then a tail that hits insanely hard. That's what I want to do. So this is the list I'm going to play. JJ.
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier with the Dracoth Blizzard, this is my list, and the core of it's the same. You got 8 Dracothian Guard total, 4 Fulminators in 1 squad, and then 2 squads of Tempesters and Hunters of the Heartland. And you have 3 squads of Liberators as screens, Vanguard Raptors for supporting fire, and 1 Lord Relictor to do everything for you.
Yeah, you've optimized the hero choices here.
Yep. So Arcane Tome on him to give him Celestial Blades to buff up anybody that's going for an attack. Translocation in case you need to move some pieces around the table a little bit. The initial deployment on this one is really just going to be a castle formation. You set up your Liberators up front, depending on what, and then just react as appropriately to your opponent as possible. What I like to do with it is just set up your Vanguard Raptors just behind your Liberators 9 inches away, just so that way whoever's, if your opponent takes the initial charge there on a screen of Liberators, then you can unleash hell into them and have A for wings to give them +1 as needed.
Sweet. Let me ask you a question here about these battalions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You've specifically chosen not to take battalions. There are a few you could easily slot these units into. I think there's like Vanguard is one of them. It just uses a sub commander and a troop, and that would give you a free all-out attack once per game, which seems pretty useful. But another one that you could take is the it's the Stormcast one. Mergank, what am I missing here? The one-drop Stormcast battalion. What's that called?
Redemption Brotherhood.
Yeah, the Redemption Brotherhood. You could take that and drastically reduce the number of drops here from 10, I think, down to like 4 or 5. Is that something you'd want to consider?
Yeah, that's something you can try to go for if you're trying to reduce drop count for sure. When I initially played this list against Ogres, I was trying to play defensively and just react. I was hoping to go for a second turn and ideally get a Stonehorn tied up in the Screen of Liberators, but I ended up going first, so what I ended up doing as a result was just double tapping and setting out a squad of Tempesters to annihilate one of the Stonehorns on the table. But yeah, no, honestly, in terms of battalion choice, like, it's kind of a statement on where the battalions are at right now, right? We're usually optimizing going for a one drop. We're getting that extra information with Warlord, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I was going to say that. I was going to say exactly what you were going to say, but go ahead, finish your sentence.
Yeah, and then obviously Hunters of the Heartland is probably one of the most valuable ones, especially for our hammer units, right?
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, the reason I actually support this thing and not the Redemption Brotherhood, because it's like when you're already like a 5-drop list, the 2-drop and 1-drop and 3-drop lists are already going to outdrop you and, get turn priority. So after a certain point, it's sort of diminishing returns to try and reduce your drops. You might as well just try to go for more information and deploy accordingly.
Oh yeah, that's why I was suggesting the Vanguard Brotherhood, because it would give you a free command point. But that's something you got to keep in mind.
Oh, sure, yeah. You could organize this better to get some free effects. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's
just I don't think it's
those battalions are so weak, man. Like I feel like they could have done a lot more with those battalions to make them more useful. Aside from Warlord and Battle Regiment, they're all really boring and use awkward unit combinations. Maybe it's just because we play Stormcast when we're seeing that, but yeah, I don't care about a free all-out attack once per game. That's almost nothing.
Yeah, we get that with Torlon.
Yeah, which we haven't seen a Torlon yet in these lists, which is funny. So what are pros, cons, and what would you do differently with this list if you wanted to make some changes, JJ?
Pros are that it can be a defensive list if or it can take an initial charge if you've deployed properly, and then it could really riposte well. Like having those the Dracoth Guard, it's like you mentioned in the Everlist, they are very potent, and they'll take out a Stonehorn no problem if you're playing against Ogres, for example. You get okay mobility with the Dracoths. You have lots of options for range suppression between Raptors and then your basically mobile Judicators and the Tempesters. And you could play it as a widescreen to block out your opponent from deep striking or sending reserves in. Cons here, you're really setting yourself out for shooting. And of course, you're spreading your Relictor out really thin. Like, he can't be everywhere at once, so you want to localize things or keep things on your side of the board type thing.
Now, he does have the Mirror Shield, so he's really hard to take down. But only having one hero leaves a lot to be desired. There's a few flaws with the Stormcast army in that we need a couple heroes, but none of them are really that good. So that's why everybody ends up using like Relictor and Cantor and sometimes Imperator. Like that's the core. So you need them nearby to activate holy commands, and you need them especially because there's a battle plan that only leaders can score on, right? So that one is really rough for this list. I don't know how you've only got one hero. I think that's just like
you're not winning that one at all.
Yeah, just try to get the highest score you can and good sportsmanship, right?
Yeah, and of course, because it's a slow start list, if you're not careful in picking out your tactics or trying to control things properly, you could fall behind early and potentially lose.
I mean, there's that one mission where it's literally about heroes, and I think that's like an auto loss, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, Apex Predators, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I really do like the concept of just taking a bunch of dudes instead of our heroes, because it's kind of a statement on how generally weak and not as impactful Stormcast heroes are. We do need a couple of them, but in second edition, I'd find myself running 6. I'd love it. Azure Rose
And now
for
that I feel
Valdor.
like the utility has been reduced further, especially because of the loss of that. Yep.
Their points.
Also, they
have gone
raised
up.
the points on a lot of them. Like, I don't know what they did to the Relictor to make it 145 from 100, but hey, why not?
Although I got to say, your sequence on these lists is pretty funny, following up St. Karazai, which is all heroes, no units.
Yeah, I did that on purpose. Thank you for noticing. I put 2 Stormkeep lists together. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, this is it looks fun. I love Dracoth. It's definitely a testament to how strong they are that you can run a list with almost no heroes and still be pretty successful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we could win by tabling, yeah, that would be the list. Just Dracoths.
Yep.
Totally.
Now there was that one list. Who was that? Ben Johnson, I think, went 5-0 using a list that was just Dracoths and a Lord Celestin on Dracoth. So there's hope. If you know that you're not going to be playing Apex Predators, maybe just cut back on the heroes. That could be a viable option moving forward.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, because would you rather have Celestial Blades to buff 4 Fulminators, or would you rather have 2 more Fulminators?
That's true. I could make an argument for a list that doesn't go beyond a single Lord Relictor and a Knight Incantor, and just everyone else's dudes.
Yeah.
Like no other heroes.
Yeah,
like literally just 265 points on whatever, 270 points on heroes, and everything else is a dude. So.
Yeah, now I noticed one last thing I want to say here, JJ, is you have all your Liberators fulfill your battle line in this list. So is there a particular reason you went Hammers of Sigmar?
Well, initially it was just to get the battle line slots for the Dracoths, but I mean, at that rate, you're right. I did just slot the Liberators in as a screen. Maybe what you want to do is go Hallowed Knights in this case, and then get that 5-up ward.
Yeah, you'd have to find some room for Gardas here. Maybe swap out some Tempesters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing you could do is go Celestial Vindicators, so you can get the Blessed Weapons on the Fulminators every time they charge.
Yeah, that's right.
Or Tempesters. They have melee.
Yeah, also good, yeah. And that effect does last until your next hero phase. So if you charge with Fulminators, when they get struck back, you can use it as well. The next list here I called Castle Glaiveskull. I went with a little bit of a different direction than I do with my normal castle lists, in that I went with 15 Protectors in a 1-drop army. So this is very similar to the Hallowed Strike list that I've talked about, but it takes some interesting diversions here. So instead of taking Gardas and getting the 5-up ward, you just get a lot more Protectors. That's the core of it. It's not short and sweet. But because you're taking less units, you can also fit it all in a 1-drop list. That's a potentially a big advantage depending on what you're playing against. So you've got your Relictor with Translocation and High Priest. You have a Lord Arcanum on Toralon with Thundershock. You have a Lord Castellant with +1 save and with an Arcane Tome to do Celestial Blades. Because you're playing a 1-drop list, you don't necessarily care about having the Dispel Scroll, because you can choose who goes first or second in a lot of matchups. And having a Dispel Scroll is really useful if you can't control that. So you want to be protected against something really devastating coming your way. So if you are going 1-drop, you can afford to drop the Incantor for something else. So then on top of that, you've got 15 Protectors, 2 screens of Liberators, and a squad of 6 Raptors with Thunderbolt Volley. So this deploys very similar to your typical castle. You got your Liberators up front, Protectors are behind them. You want your Liberators to absorb a charge from your opponent. You want to unleash on top of them, and then you want to riposte with your Protectors. Long strikes need to be in the back, but you definitely want to be within range of a unit that you can double tap on first turn. And unfortunately, unlike a lot of castle lists that use Paladins, you can't rely on 9-inch charges, so you have to play this kind of defensive castle style. You could, in an emergency Hail Mary situation, you could do a Translocate into a rerollable 9-inch charge. I wouldn't use that as your first step. The first step with this list is shoot your opponent down, force them to come to you, and play the long game. Play 5 rounds, play on objectives. So advantages with this list is that you've got 15 Protectors. That's 45 wounds with 2-up save all the time. And that is further buffed up with all-out defense, with a Castellant, and with Mystic Shield. This is an incredibly durable unit that nothing else in Stormcast comes close to this level of durability. It's insane.
Yeah, pretty much only mortal wounds are going through that thing.
Right. So that's always the argument is, do you take Gardas for the 5-up board, or do you just take more protectors? They're about equal. 15 protectors is 45 wounds. If you have 10 protectors with a Gardas, that's effectively 45 wounds. I'd rather have 5 more protectors. It's more attacks. It's more bodies.
Because you're getting potential wounds, but you're also getting potential damage in this list as opposed to yeah.
So originally in this, I had Andrasta, I think, instead of this Toralon that I've got here, and it was just a little too tight on points. I had to end up dropping her, and I'm actually quite happy I did. The Toralon is really, really efficient. He helps shore up some of the weaknesses of this list, like command point inefficiency, not having a monster. It gives it a second wizard so that you can do more things, and sometimes it also casts Thundershock, and sometimes that also goes off, which makes you even more durable. So the one drop deployment is here as a meta decision. You can't do this with Hallowed Strike without making significant changes to the list, by the way. You'd have to potentially drop the Incantor in that. So if you are dropping the Incantor, you start thinking, okay, well, what else can I drop? And that's kind of where that thought process led me to this list. So it's got a relatively high model and wound count for a Stormcast list. You know, we're not the highest model or wound count army. And it still does have 2 units of Liberators that can take charges, which is great. I really... The more I build these elite lists, like I showed you guys with the Dracoth Blizzard earlier, very elite. You have to give up something to hold objectives. The game's not a death match, right? It is objective control, and it's about scoring points. So I like having these disposable units of Liberators. Now, the downsides here, you don't have any Aether Wings, so you can't get +1 hit in the hero phase, which is unfortunate. So if you're playing against a hero that has -1 to be hit, you're going to be on 4s on your double tap, which is rough. You don't have a Mirror Shield or an Amulet on the Toralon. I feel like you do need to have the extra Arcane Tome on the Castellant because you want to be casting all those extra spells. You want both +1 to wound, and you also want Mystic Shield, so not really much you can do about that. No Hunter's Battalion here, so your Protectors can get stomped, they can't get roared. Your Liberator screens can get stomped by Maw Crushes and just die, which is really unfortunate. Now, you could go more drops with this list. So you could go Hunters, and you could go Warlord, and then you could fix up some of these problems. You could put your Liberators and Protectors, all of it, in Hunter's Battalion, and then you could take the extra artifact and take a Mirror Shield or an Amulet. So those are all options, but then if you're doing that, you might as well go Hallowed Strike and get the 5-up ward too. So, little things here and there.
Yeah. My main concern is, I think you have a good list. I think, no Hunters might definitely hurt you in the long run.
Yeah. Playtesting will determine what's better. I think it's a meta decision. In general, the 1-drop has advantages, and the Hunters and Warlord have advantages, so it just depends on what you think you're going to be facing. If you're facing other 1-drop lists, maybe you just give up on the coin flips. You get tired of those, and you just say, screw it, I'll let you decide, and I'll take the extra value. Which could definitely be the right decision, because when you're a very slow, methodical list like this, every loss really hurts, and you have to play very carefully. You can't be making huge gambles and huge mistakes. Protectors are very slow, and you're relying on them to do any of your melee damage. So other things you could do is you can reduce your reliance on that 15 Protector block. You could, for example, swap out 5 Protectors and then use the extra points to bring in some Retributors as a secondary hammer. That is an option. You could swap the Raptors and the Liberators for 15 Judicators if you just want a ton of bodies. You could probably find room in this list somewhere to bring Andrasta back in and start reviving Protectors every turn. I feel like that goes all in on the concept of 15 Protectors in a castle, and I don't think you need to go all in, because it has such significant weaknesses that your strong matchups will get better, which you don't necessarily need, and your weak matchups will get harder, which is definitely going to hurt you. So, this is... I think this list is good. It can go 4-1. I think if you get the right matchups, it'll go 5-0. If you play all melee armies, if all you play against is Iron Jaws, you're going to go 5-0, I think, with this list.
Yeah, I agree.
And you get to use 15 Protectors. I love that. So many glaives sticking up in the air. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about that 1-drop efficiency. I think most lists, if you actually analyze the meta, there's a lot of that 1-drop stuff going on. To be able to build a list like that is generally not a bad idea, even though I think Stormcasts sort of generally play more reactively, and so we're okay with having higher drops. But yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see how this works. And plus the idea of like that 15 protector porcupine just seems so good. Yeah, definitely give it a shot.
It's the inversion of JJ's list from earlier, where he had the shooting on the outside. I'm going to have the glaives on the outside in this case.
Which isn't a bad thing.
It works. Both ways, it works. All right, Mergank, run us through Bastion's Elite Bastion.
Okay, so the basic idea that was behind this was I really wanted to use Bastion. I really wanted to find ways to make him good. And since he is Hammer's Sigmar, you are locked into that to make the most out of him. And then you get Dracoths. So I basically tried to make a bit of a castle with the Bastion, and what I realized while doing it was it's not as good as Hallowed Strike, because Hallowed Strike gives you that defensive boost, whereas in a Hammer's thing, you typically want to be going all offense all the time. So in that regard, I decided, hey, why don't I ally in a battle mage and with wild form and just have them backlining outside of unbind range and just catapulting things forward. And so the idea with this list is simple. It's your basic castle formation. You shoot things with Vanguard Raptors, and then you have a bunch of Dracoths in the Hunters of the Heartland to essentially act as hammers. And Bastion sort of either supports the Vindicators, or Vindicators can either stay behind or move up with Bastion towards one objective, towards a flank. And if your opponent doesn't want to dedicate a whole bunch of resources, he can basically lock that down, allowing you to focus down the center with the rest of your army. The other thing this list lets you do is it lets you sort of have these, you could say, 7-inch charge bombs that you could do with comboing with Wildform and Translocation. And especially since Bastion is so slow, if you really want to get into combat somewhere, Wildform him, Translocate him, and then catapult him somewhere. The Fulminators generally have the movement, but there are instances where you would want to do that with them too. So yeah, simple list, just Hammers of Sigmar, use Bastion to its fullest. I could definitely see, I think if you go to my potential changes, if you go to the next slide. Oh. Yeah, so Bastion is there for CP efficiency. You can definitely make him tankier with a Mystic Shield or something like that. This list is really elite, so it'll struggle. Not much in the way of screens other than those 5 Vindictors. I could also see taking in the Hunters of the Heartland, taking a squad of 4 Fulminators and then 2 Fulminators instead of the 2 Fulminators and 2 Tempestors. Or you could even see trying out 15 Crossbow Adjudicators or Skybow Adjudicators for a better model or wound count instead of the 6 Vanguard Raptors.
So the wound count thing is it's a bit of a tricky situation because on paper you do get more wounds, but it's about taking those wounds, right? So if your Adjudicators get hit, they're probably going to die all the same as your Raptors. So although on paper you would get more wounds, against light shooting it's helpful, but against any significant damage they will still die. And it doesn't seem like you have enough screens to fully block off Deep Strike charges, or let's say some teleport charge shenanigans. It feels like you're going to have a side of your castle here that's a little bit weaker.
Mm-hmm.
So the wounds could help against D3, D6 mortal wounds. Definitely you save a lot more models. I'm not sure if crossbows are the way to go with this because you just don't have the speed to get to the other side of the table that reliably. Even though you do have wild form and translocation. Oh, on that topic, I think I would go High Priest here instead of Master of Magic, because it seems like if you're relying on this wild form translocation charge combo, you want to make it as reliable as possible. So re-rolling translocation removes one of the big pain points here, which is rolling a 2-up to translocate. You're already relying on
I could move the Mirror Shield and trade onto the Lord Relictor, the High Priest Mirror Shield translocation.
Because I'm wondering why are you trying really hard to protect this Knight Incantor? What's he doing for you exactly? He's just casting Celestial Blades, right?
Yeah, I guess I wanted more reliable casting, because on a shorter board, I feel like Bastion doesn't necessarily have a problem foot slogging. You could run him up, you could even use his free command on him to move him 12 inches, and then he can keep up with Dracoths. And he's not really something that needs to get the fight first. He's pretty tanky, so having a reliable reroll on Mystic Shield or Celestial Blades on a Fulminator, with Mirror Shield to protect the Knight Incantor with his Spell Scroll. That's what my initial thought process was, but it could go either way. I'm just trying to make a list that essentially catapults Bastion, maybe a few hard-hitting units every turn.
Yeah, I think just because of what you're describing, High Priest makes more sense than Master of Magic in this case. Now, if you were to go with 4 Fulminators instead, then maybe Celestial Blades makes more sense because you can be more efficient buffing them with Mystic Shield or with Celestial Blades.
Sure, yeah, I can see that.
So this is very similar to the Dracoth Blizzard that I have, except you're using Bastion and Stormkeeps. Instead of Stormkeeps, you're using Bastion and Scions. So it's very similar. Like it's Dracoths, Raptors, support heroes, right? That core is really hard to mess up because Dracoths are so strong and our support heroes are so it's obvious what they're supposed to do, right? So it's just a matter of how do you support them. And I like the Bastion pick here. He is cheaper than the Phoenix in terms of opportunity cost. You don't have to play Stormkeeps. He doesn't need an artifact. You could, looking at this again, you could potentially go, if you drop one of the heroes, you could go 1-drop or 2-drop if you keep this exactly the same, right?
Yeah, because I don't really feel like, I mean, I took Thunderbolt Volley and Steadfast March just to be able to get more movement, but I can make a case that if I'm really just going for Translocation Bombs, I don't need Steadfast March. I could possibly go 2-drop with this. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Translocation Bomb is an interesting idea, in particular with Dracoth, because I'm not sure they need it. Like if you have Steadfast March with Wild Form, I think that's enough mobility on that unit to get them in turn 1 reliably.
Mm-hmm.
So run me through pros and cons and possible changes that you'd make.
So pros, you have really tanky Bastion. You have good Dracoths with high damage, high Ren to support them. So the list is fairly straightforward in that regard. You just want to be shooting things. You want to be killing things with Dracoths. The cons, obviously, is like you have a really low model count. I think you have 17 models in this list. So you're really going to struggle if your models start dropping due to Alpha Strikes or any shooting range projection. It is high drop currently, but like we discussed, we could make it a low drop to not give away turn priority. And not much in the way of screens. You're going to have to be screening with some valuable units. Bastion helps because he can be out there with Vindicators. He possibly can absorb a charge, if you're expecting that, because, you could put him on a 2-up, 4-up ward save, which makes him really, really tanky. And plus he can heal if he kills a single model. But it really, it'll struggle because you have so many of your points in this, one model, and you expect him to do a lot. And if you're not doing a lot with him, if you don't have things to support him or get him into combat as soon as possible over objectives, I feel like you might lose games if they kill everything else and ignore Bastion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a concern that I have, that they might just target everything else in your army and just ignore Bastion on one objective entirely.
So there's this is an interesting time to bring up a discussion we've been having in the Stormkeep Discord about Bastion's ability to redeploy units. And based on the wording, it seems like it's not possible to move units in and out of Scions of the Storm using his ability because it specifies that, because Scions of the Storm specifies that it can be used during deployment. And Bastion doesn't say specifically you can use Scions. He says you can, after the game starts, you can redeploy a unit. Since Scions requires the deployment phase, which is before the game begins, it seems like you can't do that. And he also specifies that he has to bring in a unit that he can redeploy a unit that's on the battlefield. And Scion specifically says it's off the battlefield. So it seems like, I'm not sure if this is their intent, but as the rules are written, it seems that Bastion can only move units that are on the table to another part of the table within your deployment zone. So given that, do you think that would be a very powerful ability in Stormkeeps? Because we've been talking about how hard it is to protect Longstrike Raptors in a Stormkeep list. But with Bastion, do you think it would be possible to have this, you went first after I put down my Raptors, and now I've moved them, to the other side of the board out of your shooting range? Because I believe you do have an encounter.
Yeah, I think
you have an encounter here to protect against teleports and things like that. So I think this could work as a Stormkeeps list, because I'm not seeing what you really want in Scions here besides the Raptors, and I think Bastion is enough to protect the Raptors.
No, definitely, and I think going off of that, the other version that I want to build eventually is perhaps try a Stormkeep list, because it's not just about the Raptors. I mean, I could easily just go to Stormkeep and switch out the Raptors for Judicators or something. My main concern is if I take Bastion with Vindictors, and I know positioning is so important in Stormkeep, because if you mess up the positioning with your Vindictors, they're not going to be in position for that counting as 15 models thing. So being able to move Vindictors around and sort of be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to move my Redeemers here, sort of better position my castle or better get them ready for that OPSEC thing. That's not a bad idea. And Bastion is an excellent support for Vindictors. He keeps up, and you sort of have to go for him over your Redeemers, because otherwise he'll just wreck them with Usklar and all his abilities that he's got,
So maybe what we do is pivot this list, and instead of going heavy on the Dracoths, because we were talking about how low it is on wounds and how you don't necessarily need Scions here. What if we this would be a completely different list, by the way, but it's an interesting thought experiment. What if we went 15 Vindictors, Castellan, Vandus, make a really durable hammer anvil, because 15 Vindictors with +1 attack do a fair amount of damage. And we play Stormkeeps, and we can, if we're worried about them getting sniped turn 1, we can redeploy them with Bastion. He does redeploy D3 units, which is annoying that it's a random number, but generally you will only want to redeploy one key unit, right? If you're up against a shooting army, you want to redeploy your shooters, or you could redeploy the Vindicators. So that's a entirely different list, kind of on a tangent, but it's seeing this makes me think about, could Bastion Stormkeep be the secret to making Stormkeep work?
Yeah.
Tune in next time when we talk about that list, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to make that list, but I want to make Bastion work, and it's like one of those models that we talked about how confusing it is, how hard it is to put him into lists, and I really do want to see if we can make it work, and that'd be so nice because my God, that model is beautiful. Please.
I like Bastion swinging on a flank, not fighting against the Gargants, not fighting against Archaon, but fighting against the 10 or 20 Chaos Warriors that they brought alongside Archaon, or the Untamed Beast,
that they sent to the flank to be like, oh, I'm going to take this objective and you don't have the resources dedicated. I'm like, okay, I'll send one dude there, and that one dude will keep dealing with them the entire time because you can't kill him fast enough, and he will heal back to full.
Right, and he's a great distraction card effects in this, and not just in the traditional sense of people are going to waste resources trying to kill him. They're going to waste resources trying to survive against him. Like if he hits a 20-man Chaos Warrior unit while you're also contesting Archaon in the center with your Fulminators, he can only all-out defense one of them. Which one's it going to be? Is it going to be the Warriors that are going to take a lot of damage against Bastion, or is it going to be Archaon who's fighting 4 Fulminators? I have a feeling it's going to be Archaon, right? So Bastion's going to have free reign. He's this great secondary threat. You put him on a flank, he issues commands anywhere. I think you can definitely make him work. I think the list just has to support his strengths.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, definitely got the cogs turning now.
Hey, maybe we'll outsource this to our to the people in our Discord. Just make the best Bastion list.
That'll be the challenge. Next Lords of the Storm, all Bastion list. Let's go.
Oh, let's go. Yeah.
Okay, this is the final list that the three of us have submitted. After this, it'll just be community list. But I am very excited about this one because it's the only one that isn't like Hallowed Knights or Hammers or Knights Excelsior. We're very focused on what we want to build, obviously, right? But my goal with this list here is to make Celestant-Prime work. So let's look at what Celestant-Prime does. He gets a guaranteed 12-inch charge out of Deep Strike, and when he comes in, he hits like a truck. If you wait long enough. That's the caveat here. He is not an Alpha Strike model. If you are aggressive with him turn 1, all you're getting out of him is the D3 Meteor, Mortal Wounds, and you're getting 3 attacks, which aren't that great. They're rent 3 damage, they're strong attacks, but only 3 of them isn't enough to do significant damage. Once you get up to 5 or even 7 attacks with him, that's when you really start feeling the pain with Celestant-Prime. So the goal of this list is to build a castle that can survive long enough for Celestant-Prime to come in and put the hurt on people. Mm-hmm. So what supports Celestant-Prime really well? Well, he's very fast. He wants something that can react to his speed. So when you bring him in, you pretty much never bring him in turn 1. You could, right? If the enemy is castling up, you can bring Celestant-Prime in, and you've got this great meteor shower that's going to be raining down that can't be stopped. It can't be screened, nothing, right? It just does mortal wounds in an area. It's very good. But typically, you're going to keep him in reserve round 1. Maybe you bring him in round 2. Ideally, you bring him in round 3. If you leave him any more than round 3, he's dead. The rules just kill him. There's nothing stopping that. Maybe he should have a special rule that lets him stay longer than a normal model would. I'm not sure. Because that's how he used to work, right? You used to be able to wait until round
4 or 5.
Yeah, and then he'd have like 11, 13 attacks and just murder things, right?
So, or 11, yeah. But it's okay, so the one thing I will say, I like this idea, but as Tyler mentioned when we were Warhammer Weekly, there's a lot of games where you don't actually have the time to keep him until in the sky till turn 3. I feel like being as we are and how fast AOS games are now that the board is even smaller, I feel like the Celestant-Prime, you'll be dropping in on a turn 2 a lot more often than you think.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe Indrasta here is better because she has that anti-monster ability. She can revive Vanguard Raptors if 1 or 2 of them get killed or something. revive Liberators. I don't know. Maybe she's better here.
Maybe, but for the sake of humoring me, this is trying to make Celestant-Prime work, right? So let's stick with that concept for this one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The name of the list. Yeah.
It's Celestant-Prime Celestial Drakes. It's a mouthful to say. So I'm thinking about how do you want to build a very durable castle. You could go Hallowed Knights. That's one option, right? But I thought a different way to go would be to take really, really durable, cost-effective, like per wound units. So I ended up with Liberators and Storm Drake Guard as my battle line, which of course means you need a Knight Draconis as your general. And how do you support that? You want the longest possible range shooting. Long strikes fit into that perfectly. So what you want to be doing with this is setting up in a castle formation, baiting the enemy to come to you, and surviving. Your goal is to survive with this and buy time for Celestant-Prime to come into play. That's why you have the 1-drop, so that you can force the opponent to go first. Generally is actually how I would do this, is to force them to go first and then play reactively. If you ever get the 2-3 double with this list, oh baby, it's going to hurt. So it's got a Knight Draconis here. It's got a Knight Incantor. The Incantor is going to be casting Celestial Blades. The Draconis is going to be casting, typically, Mystic Shield on that unit of 4 Storm Drake Guard. And then you can all-out defense them, and then they're a 3-up with +2 to save. Beautiful, right? It's going to take a lot to get them anywhere. It's going to take a lot of damage to kill them, especially if you support them correctly by screening with Liberators. So I feel like this has...
Storm Drake Guard, yeah. I think the Storm Drake Guard and Vanguard Raptor is such a solid core that, durable and offensive.
Yeah, and the Guard, with 4 models, the Guard take up a lot of space, and with the 2 extra Liberator squads, you can avoid the Storm Drake taking the brunt of enemy, like, powerful charges. So I feel like this particular formation and these particular units fit the Prime the best. From what I've done so far, I think this is the best way to play the Celestant-Prime. Hopefully I can find a better way. That would be great. It's always fun to find a better thing to do. But yeah, I think this has got the legs to be the optimal way to play Celestant-Prime. So Celestant-Prime, why did we go Celestial Vindicators in the first place, right? It's because Celestant-Prime can guarantee any dice roll. So if he guarantees a dice roll of 6 on his hit roll, if you charged him, you can use Driven by Vengeance, the Celestial Vindicator's ability, to generate another hit. That ability also works really well in Storm Drake Guard for the first 2 rounds when you're not using the Celestant-Prime. And you might even want to use it on that unit anyway, because Celestant-Prime might be using his guaranteed 12-inch charge to get in after his Scions. So that's the major combo here. Knight Draconis also allows you to double tap Breath in the hero phase, and you're also doing Thunderbolt Volley in the hero phase. So that's a lot of damage before any all-out defense is activated. Very, very tough spike damage. I think with the correct application of damage, you'll be able to survive long enough to get Celestant-Prime to his maximum here. And what I really like about the Drakes in particular is that they're, I mentioned this as a castle build, but it is very versatile. You can play aggressive if you need to, right? If you're playing against a Lumineth list, you can just drop the Prime in round 1 and start dropping meteors. You can do the hero phase move with your Drakes, and then you can teleport up. Oh, sorry, you don't have a Relictor in this list. But yeah, you could bring the Drakes up and then keep them in range and do the double tap Breath and potentially just kill a Fox with that. There's a lot of options in how you can play this list, and I think it's deceptively strong. I think this list is better than it looks.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like one of those damage lists where it's like every time we think of building lists, we typically think of utility first, damage second. Like, oh, I need Lord Relictor utility. Oh, I need Knight Incantor utility. But there's something to be said about just taking a bunch of damaging dudes that the opponent has to worry about in some way or the other, especially who are fast, durable, hit hard, can hit from a long distance away. And then obviously the surprise element of this Celestant-Prime, which will make people play very cagey. Like they're not just gonna, they're constantly gonna be thinking about where he could land, what he could do. Is he gonna land this turn? Is he gonna land this turn? And I think playing those mind games with your opponent, a bunch of just really tough, hard-hitting dudes, there's something to be said for that list. I think those lists can actually work, even though we tend to sort of err on the side of caution and not do that always.
Mm-hmm. Another way you could go, if you don't want to play Celestial Vindicators, you could go Tempest Lords instead. That makes Celestant-Prime's charge more reliable. A 9-inch rerolling the lowest. I believe we did the math, and it's something like a 58%, because you can choose to reroll both, or you can choose to reroll one with the Tempest Lords, or you can reroll both with a command point, I should say. So that could be a way to go. I think I like this version better, because it's just you don't have it's just more damage output, right? Like you're lacking 320 points for the first 2 rounds of the game usually. So getting the most damage out of those Drakes is really important. Now, pain points here, thankfully you're not relying on translocation for anything, which is nice. As fun as it is to have a 2-up rerollable translocation, there is still opportunity cost on it. So you're not relying on that with this list, but you don't have anything to protect any of your units against rampages. You don't have a Hunters of the Heartland Battalion, you're not playing Astral Templars, and you don't have a Mirror Shield or an Amulet on the Draconis. I feel like 2 spells is better, so your Draconis could get sniped out. You have to be very careful playing him. Despite him being 11 wounds on a 3-up, he can still be taken down from range. Other things you could do, like I've shown in other lists, you could go 6 Raptors and 5 Liberators, drop them and pick up 15 Judicators, more bodies. I think the downside there is that you have less range and you really want to play far away with this list. You don't want to be engaging round 1 or 2. You want to build time for your Celestant-Prime to get more powerful. And you could swap from a 1-drop into the typical Warlord Hunters setup that we do with a lot of our lists. I don't know if that's better. I like having turn 1 priority with this list because you do care about that round 2, 3. You want to control how you go into that. So,
yeah,
I'm definitely going to be playtesting this one. I'm looking forward to it. The Celestant-Prime has always been my favorite Stormcast model, so I definitely want to
just release the dragons.
If they would only release the dragons, yeah. So sometime in the new year, I'll be playtesting this one. I think it's 4-1, maybe 5-0 potentially. I'll have to see how hard the difficult matchups are, but the mobility that this list has over other Stormcast lists is tremendous. It's damage where you want it to be pretty much all the time.
I mean, I think if you can beat Guardians with this, and I definitely think you can, I think you're 4-1 already. I think you have a solid 4-1 chance.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I don't know what I'd do against Gotrek, but
fly around.
Yeah, just avoid him, I guess. Deploy far back.
You have enough movement on most things.
You just run around him.
Yeah.
All right, so the next 3 lists here are the winners of our community contest. We had people submit over 30 lists, and everybody voted, and these are the ones they wanted us to talk about. There was no restriction whatsoever, and we didn't influence people in voting. We just said vote for whatever you want to see us talk about. So it's not necessarily a competitive list. It's not necessarily a fun list. It's just whatever. So we're gonna have fun exploring it. So the first one here is Bad Dragons by Joel McGrath. Shout out to Joel. He's a tournament player in the Stormkeep. I believe he's from Australia. Correct me if I'm incorrect. All right, he's from Australia.
So, yeah.
So Joel here has put together a Tempest Lords. People say dragon spam. This is the real dragon spam, right? This doesn't use those puny little Storm Drake Guard that everybody's so terrified of. This uses real manly dragons. You've got your Drakesworn Templars, your general. He's got every buff in the world. He's got Celestial Instincts to retreat and charge. He's got a Tempest Axe to stop enemy pile-ins. He's got Celestial Menagerie to give all the dragons -1 to be wounded. And he's got a 5-up board. He's got 3 squads of Prosecutors. Everything's flying in Tempest Lords. Everything's rerolling charge rolls. Great. And then not fitting in any battalions are Karazai and Grande. Grande, of course, with Celestial Blades. He's going to be buffing up Karazai. Karazai is going to be wrecking stuff. This is, you guys ever play against those Flesh Eater Court lists that are just 3 Flesh Eater Court zombie dragons? This is the Stormcast equivalent of that. This is all this is. There's nothing else going on. But it looks fun. If you don't want to think too much, you just want to move forward and hit stuff, this is it. This is your list.
Yeah, it's going to annoy a lot of people. I feel like it's just going to be really, really annoying for a lot of people.
If you're playing a melee-focused army, is going to hate this, because the Drakesworn Templar reduces your pile-ins and also makes everything -1 to be wounded. And this is a lot of high bravery heroes, so they're going to get a lot of value out of healing with heroic recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And Grande,
you have Grande for that Blazing Tempest spell.
Grande's spell is excellent, and I wish he wasn't 600 points so I could fit him in more lists. But his spell is really, really good. You can give a unit -1 save, so even your javelins start shooting at Rend 1, which is gross.
Javelins are Rend 1.
Are they? I thought they were Rend 0 now.
No. They basically lost the 2 attacks. They're all 1 attack now.
Oh, okay. They lost their double damage. That's right. Okay. So they go up to Rend 2, effectively.
Yep.
Awesome, right? Karazai starts hitting at Rend 4 with his jaws, so just no armor save. Sorry, guys. Save stacking? I don't think so. And grand strategy, of course, Beastmaster. Now, the only problem with a list like this is what do you take as the holy command? You can't get any value from double tapping. You can't get any value from paladins getting an extra attack. So the choice is either you want to run in charge, in which case you're giving up your breath, and all of these guys have a good breath attack, or you're giving or nothing. That's it. That's the option, right? So he took Final Thunderstrike here, which makes sense because everything else is just not applicable.
Yep.
So if you,
putting 18 wounds to a 5-up mortal wound when you die, not bad.
No, 19 if it's one of the Thunderstrike models.
Oh yeah, definitely. I forgot the 2 big dragons are Thunderstrike.
So I really appreciate this list. I don't know how serious Joel was about it because it looks memey, right? Like it looks a little like it doesn't look like a serious list, but I could have a lot of serious fun with this.
Yeah, I take this to an RTT just to mess with people, see who's prepared.
Yeah. Well, how many models do you have? 12. 12 models. Yep. Love it. Great job, Joel. Congratulations.
All right. So my turn now. This list name brings me back to when Paul and I used to play D&D. Shout out to Baby Grants. So we've got Yolo Swaggins submitted by Ramaanica.
Well, hold on. That's not the full name. You got to say the full name.
Yolo Swaggins. Drop it like it's hot.
Thank you.
Wow.
So we're taking up 2,000 points. We're forgoing that Triumph. We got 8 drops, 28 model count, and 74 wounds, so we're a little on the low side here. See what's going on. Slotted in the Warlord Battalion, we've got Lord Imperator equipped with Amulet of Destiny. General Lord Relictor, typical loadout here, High Priest Mirror Shield Translocation. Knight Incanter set up with Azurite Halo. We got a Disroll spell in there, obviously. Your Reinforced Vanguard Raptors with crossbows, 3A for brings to support them. Hunters of the Heartlands with 5 Vindicators, 5 Liberators, and Reinforced Squad of Grainhammers in there as well. And that fills out our battle line slots, actually. Grand Strategy, hold the line. We got some beefy battle line options there.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
All right, obviously we got Stormcast Guard in here as well. Quite honestly, I think the concept that we're going for here is just bring everything on the table and throw everything we can at the opponent. What do you guys think?
This is a kitchen sink list, right? Just toss everything at the opponent. I'm not certain about the Amulet of Destiny on the Lord Imperator. I'm not sure how much you need to keep him alive. Giving him a 5-up ward doesn't seem necessary. And I'm not sure about the Azurite Halo on the Knight Incanter. I think I would really prefer a Celestial Blades on there to buff up the Stormdrake Guard. Though I guess if you're just casting Mystic Shield every turn, it really doesn't matter.
I think the only justification for Lord Imperator not having the AOD is the free command point, right?
Yeah, because you could just Scions him into play and then drop the Grand Hammers immediately afterwards. There's no reason necessarily to have him on the board.
He's not really doing much other than dropping 1. If he had 2 Annihilator units, I would say, maybe you want to make him survive. But even then, you can just Scions the Imperator in and not have to worry about it. It's not something they're going to target over, dragons and Annihilators and Vanguard Raptors staring down. I don't think it's going to be a target priority for them to do that. But no, I like this list. It's like a sort of toned down version of not trying to go all out on the Paladins, with sort of trying to put eggs in different baskets with taking dragons. Because,
well, let's be serious here.
Such a good unit.
6 Annihilators is pretty all out, right? That's so much overkill for a lot of situations, but it's just the right amount to kill Gargants very reliably. So I appreciate that.
Well, if you notice, this list is actually very close to a castle formation, as opposed to earlier one, which you sort of compared to a sniper's nest, but these orbital troopers dropping down every time they come close. This is more of a traditional castle. You only really have this one big drop, but everything else is you can have a decent castle with Vindicators, Liberators, Aether Wings, and Vanguard Raptors, and then have Stormdrake Guard for a counterpunch, which is not a bad idea.
Yeah, no, that's a fine idea. The typical problem with a castle list using Paladins is, for example, using Protectors, is they're very slow and they're unreliable to teleport around. But if you have an Imperator with Grand Hammers, they are going to just delete something on the other side of the board at some point during the game, and everything else here can sit back and wait for that to happen and then move out to support them once they're down. So the Stormdrake Guard can do that. They can do their hero phase move in anticipation of the Grand Hammers dropping in, and they can move in to be a supporting unit. The long strikes have long range so that they can sit back. I like that it has the Aetherwing Translocation combo for the double tap to get +1 hit in the hero phase. There's a lot going for this list that I really like. I think I would swap out some of the enhancements, but I like a lot of this list. I think I would actually rather run 2 squads of Liberators and try to get the Triumph. I would prefer the Triumph, I think, over having Vindictors in this list.
I agree. I think in this case, because their Vindictors aren't doing much for me, I think I'll just take 2 Liberators. Yeah.
And another thing I might possibly consider, instead of taking the Amulet of Destiny, you could take an Arcane Tome, but you could just not take an artifact, and you could take you could potentially take Unleash Thy Hatred and make those Annihilators just the most overkilly thing ever. They are in Hunters, so they can't be roared, so you could do the most damage in the game with them if you take Unleash Thy Hatred.
Yeah, totally. Good list. Not bad.
I like it. It's I like it. It's well-rounded. It's focused on the Grand Hammers and the Long Strikes, but I think the Stormdrake Guard rounded out really well. It adds speed and a second melee hammer. You typically don't have that when you go heavy on Grand Hammers and Long Strikes. And
it's a durable hammer. That's what I like. It's like 18 wounds on a 3-up save as opposed to 9 on a 3-up save.
Yep.
I really like that part.
Yeah. Or you
Plus,
could
it's
call
a monster for battle tactics.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. It is a monster, so that's 2 free points right there, right away. So this is
good list for Ramaanica.
Let's say, despite the name, this is a serious list.
Yes.
And I think maybe having a name like this makes it more satisfying to win, because your opponent will be like, really? I lost to Yolo Swaggins? Drop it like it's hot?
I like the name.
Right on.
All right, and finally, from our community lists, we have Bastianstrike. I really appreciate this because I've been trying to build this with Bastion, and I really appreciate any input. So thanks to user Clockwork, we finally have a great Hammers of Sigmar Scions of the Storm list. It includes a battle regiment, including Bastion, the big man himself, a Relictor and Incanter, 5 Vindictors, 6 Raptors, 2 groups of 3 Aetherwings, and then a Hunters of the Heartland battalion with some tasty Dracoths, because if you're running Hammers of Sigmar, why not Dracoths? And I actually quite like this list. He's basically, I think, trying to make your traditional castle formation, have Dracoths for a counterpunch and just fast-moving units, have Bastion as like a sort of... I hate to say Bastion is a screen, but he is durable enough to just stay behind some Vindictors and some Aetherwings that are like spread out as a screen and just like counterpunch anything that comes close. I think he lends a lot of CP efficiency to this list. He's a good anti-Gargant tech. You can basically lock down a flank with him, and because you have a decent amount of screens in the form of Aetherwings and Vindictors, you don't really feel that elite model count like you did in the list that we discussed earlier, the one that I put up. And I actually really like this list. Yeah, I like the idea of putting the 2 Fulminators together. That's one of the possible changes I had discussed in my list. I think a group of Fulminators, Tempestors advancing up, being supported by Raptors, and then having Bastion on just a flank with maybe Vindictors or nothing really, because he's tanky enough to do it. I think this is definitely the variation of the list that I talked about earlier that I would try and run after some play testing.
Yeah, I think this is where you would have ended up after a couple games. Would be like, oh, make these couple changes here and there. It's interesting, the double Aetherwing squad, because that's 130 points and then 10 points left over. So that 140 points could go a long way. It could get you another support hero. It could do quite a few things for you here, especially if you dropped another 15 from the Vindictors. There is room to...
No, actually, I don't think it's bad. I mean, if he's using 65 points for Aetherwings, it's not a problem, because I view it as this, right? You can translocate 1 unit of Aetherwings right into the enemy's face and stop their movement, but also give you that Thunderbolt volley +1 to hit, and then keep 1 unit close by to screen things, and if something charges them, +1 to hit during Unleash Hell.
Oh yeah, it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's there's options, right? Like it's Yeah, I'm wondering about the 3 drops here, because typically what we do is we go 1 or we go like 8 or 9, and it's interesting to see somebody go 3. So what do you guys think about that?
I feel, I mean, I know what you're saying, because when I analyze the meta lists over the course of tournaments, most lists are 1 or 2 drop, and once you start going past 2, you might as well go 5 or 8 or whatever you have, because it doesn't matter at that point. If he really wanted to be way aggressive with this, I would actually put the Tempestors in the battle regiment, because I don't think Tempestors need to be in Hunters of the Heartland, because they're going to be a shooting support unit until they need to charge.
Well, I'm gonna hold you up here. I'm just gonna interrupt here. Yeah. Hunters of the Heartland requires 2 units.
Oh, okay. Oh, oops. Well, I guess then I would just go full battle regiment and I don't know, something else.
Well,
Like maybe
again,
just like
you
one.
can't do that because that's too many drops. he's one too
Yeah, I
many
mean
units to go one
that's what
drop.
I'm saying. Like I would much rather be 2 than 3 because I feel like 2 is where you're feeling comfortable. But maybe you're right. Maybe if you're going for more than 1 drop, you might as well go 8 and really try to utilize Bastion's redeploy ability because it gives you further further information on how the opponent is deployed, and then the ability to sort of just boop D3 units can be pretty useful. So yeah, the higher drop wouldn't be a bad idea either. So yeah, I can see that.
Yep, additional value could be taken. You could get extra cast with the Knight Incantor with an Arcane Tome, or you could, I don't even know what else you could do. Some of there's not really many options here. Extra enhancements, you don't really need Call for Aid. I guess Call for Aid could be useful. Extra 5 models in a very elite list like this could be pretty good.
Yeah. So my question is this, like, it's a very sort of niche discussion, like between the going Warlord versus Battle Regiment or whatever Hydra Battalion have you. If you're not trying to exclusively beat the 1-drop lists, because there's no way you can do it because you just way too much stuff you need. Is there an argument to be made for this kind of list which beats all the other lists that are also thinking, well, if I can't make a 1-drop, I'll make a 6-drop? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I don't think there's much of an argument for it, personally. I'd like to hear other people's opinions on it. Where I'm at with it is you either go 1-drop. If you're going 1-drop, it's because you have a very specific reason you want to go 1-drop. You have a list that either wants to go first really badly or wants to force your opponent to go first. And if you're not doing that, there's no downside to just getting more value. Like if you can build a list that doesn't care whether it goes first or second in round 1, and you can just play out all 5 rounds. Like a lot of Stormcast lists do this. That's what castle formations are meant to do. So, and Stormcast castle better than most armies in the game because we have 30-inch shooting. So because of that, if you don't care who goes first or second, and you have the tools to stop your opponent from crippling you on turn 1, why not take extra stuff? Why not go Warlord and Hunters? And in fact, more drops is really useful, especially in Stormcast. When you have an Incantor, when you have long strike crossbows, these are counter-deploy units. So not only does it not matter if you go first or second, there's a benefit to having more drops. Having more units to put down on the table gives you more information about where your opponent is setting up their key units that you want to counter-deploy.
Yep, and also I think because this is Scions, I feel pretty good about having more drops. I feel like I would much more be sold on Battle Regiment or like that 1-drop if I was playing Castle and Stormkeeps as opposed to Sons of the Storm.
Now, there is still that discussion we had earlier about Bastion with Stormkeeps. What about a Bastion 1-drop Stormkeep list? I think that would be an interesting thing to explore. Because you can use the redeploy to counter-deploy certain units. If you really care about stopping a spell, you can redeploy your Incantor. If you want to get out of range of shooting, you can counter-deploy your long strikes, whether you deploy first or second. So I think maybe that's worth exploring. So that would be...
maybe you can cut one Aetherwing unit, and then you could put both the Tempesters and Fulminators inside the Battle Regiment. And that leaves you with 75 points that you could, I don't know, take an Endless Spell with, maybe?
That's an option, yeah. An Endless Spell could be very useful here. Anyway, that's another discussion for another time. Clockwork, great list. People in the community really definitely wanted to talk about this one. And I think part of it is because Bastion just came out and everybody's hyped about him. Great model, and everybody wants to figure out how to use him. So maybe we'll just have a new Discord channel just called Bastion. Make Bastion great again, something like that.
Yeah. Well, he's already great. Let's just figure out what's
keep
great.
Bastion great.
Yeah, keep Bastion great. Sure, why not?
All right, that wraps it up for Lords of the Storm episode 2. Let's talk about upcoming videos and events. We're going to be putting up a new poll for our patrons to vote on what video they want to see next. We're going to be having a vote on whether they want to see our Battle Tome wish listing that I've been talking about for a little while here, where we take all the concepts that we just want to see Stormcast get, like maybe Vanquishers get damage 2, or maybe the Lord Exorcist has the Priest keyword now. Stuff like that. We put it all together in a single format and we talk it through. Another idea that was pitched to us was to make a general how to build lists from core concept of what this list wants to do, all the way through to fine-tuning it for your local meta, like what you can expect to fight against. And then there's the third option is going to be Stormcast as coalition units in Cities of Sigmar armies, because there are some really gross-looking combos. And frankly, I want to write all of these videos, and I'm not going to say which one I want to do the most, but I want to do all of these and we're leaving it up to our supporters to decide which one we put out first. All 3 will eventually get put out, so it's not like you're discarding the other ones. So there you go.
Choose wisely.
Yep. And JJ, you want to talk about our hobby hangouts? We had a pretty good turnout this week.
Yeah, so as usual, guys, we have our hobby hangouts 3 times a week. Wednesday evenings for the North American crowd. Saturday mornings for us for the European crowd, and then Sunday afternoons for the Australian crowd, I want to say. Yeah, that sounds about right. Times are listed on the slide here. Come hang out. We have a good time, talk about all sorts of stuff. Last hangout, we were talking about D&D and 40K and yeah, just what makes those games great and not so great.
And Dune, without spoilers. People convinced me to go see the new Dune movie, so I'm pretty stoked about it.
Yeah, I've been wanting to go see that one myself too, so I'm probably going to go check it out.
No, you like it. I'm sure you will.
Battle reports, they're still ongoing. We're thinking just because the holidays are coming up with American Thanksgiving and then Christmas and then the New Year's, we're hoping to release our first battle report sometime in January. We have completed enough renovations that we can start scoping things out, and we've got all the lighting and stuff set up. Next up is audio equipment. So thank you guys for
terrain.
And terrain. Yeah, we got to paint some more terrain. It might be a little. Might be some copy-paste terrain in a couple of battle reports until we get fully up to speed, but we're hoping we can show off more in terms of list building and tactical things and deployment, that sort of thing. And we'll increase production value as we go in terms of painted terrain and painted models and things like that. So if you want to help support us in that endeavor and our quest for world domination, consider supporting us on either Patreon or Subscribestar. We're using the revenue from this completely to get the equipment that we need for these battle reports, and we are looking for feedback on what you guys want to see as rewards. So let us know what you want. We're very open and flexible. We appreciate any and all support that we get, and we want to know how we can give back to the community that's supporting us and helping us grow.
Yeah, and I think this new battle report venture that's about to happen, and all these videos that we're doing, we're so glad to receive all the support, and especially the people who support us on Patreon. You know, Champasaur, Sleepa, Marcus Pfeffercorn, Ryan Jones, Nick Riley, Pavel Roman, Marcus LT, Spartan 12706, Andre Menendez, Red Rum Mage, Lent, Take, Colic, Grogs, Hot Bear, Bulko, Water Frogs, and Rending. Thanks, you guys. This channel continues to grow and do so well, and it's because of wonderful people like you who support us and watch us and like our videos. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you guys. Really means a lot.
And everybody in the Discord too. You guys are great. You guys always have these creative ideas that just keep me engaged all day long. It's been a lot of fun. I get my phone just blows up all day long because of how many messages are being sent. I don't want to
say every morning.
I don't want to put it on mute though because it's good stuff. I want to respond to all these messages. So yeah, keep it up. You guys are great. And I guess I have one final parting question. What are frogs?
What are frogs?
Thanks everybody. See you in the next one.
See you next time.